In my last video about Taylor's imperial phase with 1989, I mentioned that she had a tendency to sometimes punch down or weaponize her growing power in the music industry against her enemies. This is something she has always done, whether it's a boy who wronged her or a company that wanted to release her music for free. She knows how to manipulate the parasocial relationship that her fans and the public have with her to her advantage. This is theoretically brilliant when she picks a worthy opponent. For example, a man that has wronged her in a relationship context? Absolutely. She did say, after all, in 2008, if guys don't want me to write bad songs about them, they shouldn't do bad things. If you ignore that warning, that is not her problem.
If guys don't want me to write bad songs about them, then they shouldn't do bad things.
And what happens when she doubles down on a petty grudge or a feud at the height of her success? Can it have real, tangible impact on her opponent's persona? Taylor knows better than anyone that even if something that is said about you is not true, it being said at all kind of sticks with people. Maligning someone's character on the world stage does actually have an adverse effect on them, whether or not you walk it back a couple of years later. And so today we're talking about Bad Blood, the incomprehensible feud between two of our biggest pop stars in 2014, Katy Perry and Taylor Swift. If you listen to their version of events, you would think that it was all about some backing dancers, some freelance contractors. I think the backing dancers were just pawns that obfuscated a more three-dimensional tension that existed both in the industry and between these two parties. And for pop stars who write confessional songs about their lives, more often than not, business is personal. Do I think that Taylor Swift single-handedly torpedoed Katy Perry's behavior? No. Katy Perry did that all by herself. She refused to innovate and kind of stuck to a formula of pop music that stopped working after 2012. She's also not really an artist in the sense or the way that Taylor Swift is an artist. She's more of an identity, a persona, a character, and a brand. Her projects post-Teenage Dream have all been met with kind of a resounding meh, and nothing has really resonated as the death of the monoculture prevailed, and we weren't all imagining what candy-coated brand collaboration Katy Perry was going to be coming up with next. However, I do think that, there's some room for nuance here. Taylor's continual negative spotlight that she put upon her, I think, did negatively impact her reputation, and who knows how that worked against her favor behind closed doors and within the industry. I think it's not a coincidence how Katy was never able to make anything stick after she wronged Taylor. But, that's just the Tay voodoo. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the timeline of this feud, the various moving parts of the puzzle that I think create a more interesting picture than the one we've been sold over the years, the impacts of this feud, the aftermath, and kind of my reflections on what that said about the 1989 era now. Welcome to my channel, or welcome back to my channel if you've never been here before. Over 50% of you that watch my videos are not subscribed, so I'm going to need you to remedy that right now because it hurts my feelings when you don't subscribe, and it really helps me when you do. My name is Zach. I make thoughtful weekly videos about pop culture, and we are coming towards the home stretch of the 1989 month, where I have been making content all month about the various aspects of 1989. I've talked about Taylor Mania, how Taylor got to where she is right now. I've done a whole retrospective on 1989. I've talked about her candids and her pap walks that were very, very iconic from back in the day, and today we are going to be talking about the mysterious but well-publicized feud between Katy Perry and Taylor Swift. If you want to learn more about this feud in depth, you need to go and listen to our yearly episodes of The Evolution of a Snake, where we break down Taylor Swift's career in minute detail, year by year. You can get more content there at patreon.com/Swiftologist. I think going back to the origins of Katy and Taylor's friendship is actually a good way to start this, to understand what context they met each other in and how that context changed as both of their careers evolved. So in 2008, Taylor and Katy were new friends. Katy is on her first record cycle with One of the Boys, and Taylor is on her massively successful second record cycle with Fearless, already doing a headline arena tour just on her second album. Genre-wise, Taylor was squarely in her country pop era. We know that Taylor Swift was always a pop star in country drag, but the veneer of country music really allowed her to be a pop star without bending into the more sexist expectations of a starlet at the time. And Katy was the opposite of Taylor, and all too happy to give in to some of these expectations and use them to her advantage. Her image was not chaste, girlish, and thoughtful. It was brash, colorful, outlandish, and risque. Her first single was called I Kissed a Girl. Taylor was also a teenager when she befriended the much older Katy Perry, who is 5 years older than her. So when Taylor was around 19, Katy was around 24. That's actually a big maturity gap and a huge life experience gap as well. I think Taylor looked up to Katy as a cool chick and a real rocker. During the Fearless tour, she invites Katy to come out and sing Hot and Cold with her, and a couple days later, Katy says, let's write a song. Luckily, that never panned out. I think the power dynamic of their age gap probably in the friendship was somewhat remedied by the fact that Taylor certainly had the upper hand as a musician. Katy was still a rising star at this time. Her first album debuted with a respectable 47,000 copies and charted in the top 10, but it was by all accounts, compared to Fearless, a rather moderate success. However, it did yield something that Taylor very badly wanted and wouldn't go on to receive until 2 albums after Fearless. That is a #1 hit, which Katy scored with I Kissed a Girl. What I'm getting at here is that in the initial stages of their friendship, Taylor had had the upper hand. We know she's a ruthless and competitive businesswoman, and I think it's sometimes helpful for us to view pop stars as a competitive product. There's only one #1 spot on the chart at any given time. It's not America's Next Top Best Friend. There aren't 10 #1 albums that can coexist at the same time because they're also equally deserving of the slot. There's only room for one person at the very lonely tippy top. So as the scope of Katy Perry's career, so did, I think, Taylor's relationship to her. 2010 really changed the fortunes of Katy Perry and catapulted her into a level of superstardom that we hadn't seen from a female pop star in quite some time. And it was a status that she certainly didn't have when Taylor first expressed interest in being friends with her. It's hard to describe if you weren't there when it happened, but Katy Perry was the pop star of the early 2010s with her mammoth, runaway, blockbuster commercial success, Teenage Dream, often compared to Michael Jackson's Thriller for yielding 5 #1 singles from just one album. It was just an absolutely huge record, and it encapsulated everything about 2010's poptimism. The plaintive EDM ballad of Firework, the introduction of using a rap feature remix to game the charts with E.T. featuring Kanye West, and of course the iconic and legendary, just all-around wonderful pop song, Teenage Dream. There are a few things that Katy did on this record cycle that were genuinely quite original, and I think Taylor definitely took inspiration from when it came time to promote her very first pop record in 1989. And thanks to these marketing tactics that Katy deployed, this record had longevity. It charted for years after its original release with just one slight reissue and a very considered marketing package. Two of the tools that Katy used that Taylor ended up mimicking in her own album release process was using a remix to game the charts. Bad Blood and E.T. are rather similar in that respect, and having a star-studded music video. Katy did kind of the Bad Blood 1.0 prototype with the Last Friday Night music video, featuring a bunch of hot, viral internet celebrities of the time and creating a really garish, high production value, big budget, fun music video. So we're in 2010, and Katy is all of a sudden the most famous and successful female artist in the world. And where's Taylor? We all know that Speak Now was an incredible artistic feat and a major accomplishment from a creative writing point of view. By the standards set by Fearless, however, Speak Now was only a moderate success. The record yielded no hit single, and the following tour was a blockbuster, but not especially more successful than the Fearless tour. Taylor was really focused on this time at strengthening her core audience and building the lore behind her skill, laying the groundwork for a more critical acclaim in the years to come. You know, slow and steady wins the race, as we would soon find out. At this time, she wasn't really focused on reach, which is something that Katy Perry was really doing in becoming this global character that was famous all around the world for her bright, fun, non-complicated pop songs. We know that Taylor has always aspired to be a pop star and that she had it in her head that she wanted to be working with Max Martin, so I'm sure that during this period of time, Taylor was taking note of what exactly Katy Perry was doing, and I think that this may have perhaps ignited a competitiveness in her, and there is nothing wrong with that. A little bit of competition helps everybody get better. We also know that Taylor was coming into her adulthood during this time. She was turning 21, she was ready to grow up and leave the fairy tale princess thing behind for a while, but she was fairly stuck with a seemingly conservative and rather young audience and surrounded by a team that was very focused on keeping her with that core audience and not letting her rush into being a pop star. Whether this was coming from the 13 management team that surrounded her on a daily basis, of whom we got a pretty controlling glimpse in Miss Americana, or if it was from Scott Borchetta, who consistently pushed back on Taylor introducing any sort of pure pop elements into her writing at all. She met resistance everywhere she went. And in the midst of that, Red is born, this beautiful, fitful brainchild of a little bit of stifled creativity and a hunger to be bigger than what she was. By the time Teenage Dream had racked up its 5 #1 hits, Taylor still had none. And we can clearly see her bid for pop stardom beginning with the release of Red, having We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together as the first single and her very first #1 Billboard Hot 100 hit, which she was over the moon about. It's no coincidence that during this time of thinking of how she would become a pop star, she would follow Katy's lead and run straight to Max Martin in her quest. He was the certified candy-coated bubblegum pop king. And he didn't work with just anyone. He was expensive. Taylor could only convince her label to let him work on 3 songs for Red. The single choices and album rollout for this record also continued to signal Taylor's desire for pop dominance, with I Knew You Were Trouble and 22. Excellent songs that certainly charted well and cemented her proclivity to be a pop star. However, Red was no Teenage Dream. It didn't have the kind of psychological impact and the perception of hugeness that Teenage Dream have. And I think that Taylor wanted it, and she wanted it bad. As Taylor's hunger for pop stardom continues to grow, Katy reissues Teenage Dream and then releases another record called Prism with a worldwide career-cementing hit called Roar. At that time, it seems like anything that Katy touched from a pop perspective turned to gold. I know it's hard to imagine now, but Katy was really the face of the music industry for a very short period of time. There were no pop girls keeping up with her, bar maybe Rihanna on the radio. It makes sense now that Taylor studied Katy's formula and applied it to what she was doing for 1989, working with Max Martin, protracting the album release, making moments out of big singles, and adding her own unique flavor that only she could do, getting people invested in the storyline and the lyricism. This is crucially the hurdle that Katy Perry was never really easily able to clear. What Taylor has as a pop artist and writer is something that Katy Perry doesn't: the ability to write sharp, smart, and incisive lyrics and come up with her own melodies. Katy kind of takes on the sound of whatever producer she's working with, and I think that Taylor creates her own sound in each circumstance where she picks up a new collaborator. So once Taylor decides that she's going to be the biggest pop star in the world after having a go at it and realizing that there was something there with Red, she realized that Katy was her #1 competitor. And that's a threat. And what happens to threats? Threats need to be neutralized. She had to sideline Katy Perry one way or another in order to get to that elusive and hard to reach top spot. It's actually, if you think about it, kind of not even personal at all. She would do it to just about anyone. In fact, we're kind of seeing her do it to another celebrity at the moment today. When Taylor identifies a threat to the crown, the threat has to be neutralized. So while this is kind of brewing, I think in the back of Taylor's mind, the Prismatic Tour and the Red Tour are both going on concurrently. Red is very clearly a pop-oriented show. It's a lot bigger of a production than the Speak Now Tour or the Fearless Tour had been, and it's playing a lot bigger venues throughout the world. And this is a sneak peek at the kind of pop ambitions that Taylor would have going on into the future. Reviewers that attended the show noted that there were certainly big pop ambitions. At this time, Katy also enters a relationship with John Mayer, which probably had an element to play in the source of this conflict, but I think this is truly a business thing upon reflection. I want to give a quote here from Taylor about how she does view her peers in the industry as her competition or people that she needs to impress or usurp in order to get to the top, just because I want to illustrate the point that it's not all rainbows and sunshines and they are not all best friends all the time. They are competitors selling competing products. If I'm being honest, at some award shows, when the energy out there is really competitive, I know exactly what people who are my competition, how they might hear me, and it's a really stressful environment when you're on stage. You feel like maybe some people in the first few rows wish you would trip and fall, and then it would become a viral video. That's a pretty stressful and hectic situation to put yourself in, but it's my job, so I deal with the nerves and just do it, and I hope for the best. Now we're getting into the 1989 era where this feud really kicks into its first public overdrive. Taylor has an excellent new product to bring to market, 1989, and a very specific vision to execute. Katy is in a brief recess of her career, a lull where her visibility is a lot lower than it has been in the past couple of years. That's kind of an opportune way to chip away at her status as the leading pop girl. Taylor gives an interview to Rolling Stone before 1989 comes out that leads reporters directly to the trail of there being some sort of issue between the two of them. This, in the pop girl world, was a declaration of war. Swift's focus on sisterhood cuts both ways, because when another woman crosses her, she's equally fierce about hitting back. The angriest song on 1989 is called Bad Blood, and it's about another female artist Swift declines to name. For years, I was never sure if we were friends or not, she says. She would come up to me at award shows and say something and walk away, and I would think, are we friends, or did she just give me the harshest insult of my life? Then last year, the other star crossed a line. She did something so horrible, Swift says. I was like, oh, we're just straight up enemies. And it wasn't even about a guy. It had to do with business. She basically tried to sabotage an entire arena tour. She tried to hire a bunch of people out from under me. And I'm surprisingly non-confrontational. You would not believe how much I hate conflict. So now I have to avoid her. It's awkward, and I don't like it. When pressed, Swift admits there might have been a personal element to the conflict, but I don't think there would be any personal problem if she weren't competitive, she says. So on September 9th, 2014, a day after Taylor's interview is published in Rolling Stone, Katy posted a now iconic tweet that read, "Watch out for the Regina George in sheep's clothing." This cryptic message was widely interpreted as a jab at Taylor Swift, comparing her to the lead antagonist in the movie Mean Girls. Here's what Katy's backup dancers had to say on the matter. I actually remember, and I couldn't find the source for this, but one of the dancers came out and said that Taylor's environment on tour was professional. It didn't feel very fun. They didn't get to hang out with Taylor. They didn't have a lot of access to her. This kind of tracks in the sense that Taylor keeps her circle fairly small and keeps things tightly under wraps by having people sign NDAs. That dancer also noted that the relationship they had with Katy Perry was a lot more personal. It was less business oriented. She cared about their lives and wanted to be their friends. So here's what one of the dancers that was poached from the Red Tour to go on the Prismatic Tour had to say about the matter. Katy is like family to us, so we said absolutely. We weren't really dancing on Taylor's tour anyway, so I got a little bored, he added. And I guess that's kind of true. The choreography for the Red Tour was not exactly the kind of acrobatics that had been done on the Prismatic Tour, but I mean, you know, talk about betting on a losing horse. That was the last big tour other than the Witness tour that Katy Perry's ever going to have. So if you just stuck by Taylor's side, you could have been on the Eras tour. What happens next is that 1989 becomes the teenage dream of the mid-2010s. She's everywhere. Taylor has these high-profile brand partnerships. She's racking up the number ones one after the other with Blank Space and Shake It Off. And her final tally of number ones for this record, I think disappointingly to her, is not the same as Teenage Dream. She didn't really get to emulate the huge success that Katy had singles-wise. Bad Blood went to number one, #1 by sheer force, but the rest of the singles charted respectively, but not at the very top. And throughout the record cycle, when Taylor is still promoting the record and trying to get these singles to the top of the charts, there are various celebrity proxies that get kind of dragged into the war peripherally. We have Sam Smith picking one side and then defecting to the other. We have Diplo and Lorde getting into it on Twitter over Taylor Swift's booty. And then we get into what is probably the flashpoint of this entire feud, Bad Blood. Bad Blood was always destined to be a single, and I have no doubts that the feud and the strategic part of information that Taylor leaked to Rolling Stone that was specific enough to lead to Katy Perry but vague enough to not be accused of directly attacking her, I believe that that was a significant driver of interest and a deliberate morsel that she dropped in order to proactively drum that up. The Bad Blood music video, I mean, it's not a good look in hindsight. Bad Blood music video, I mean, it was just too much. Taylor took to sharing a custom poster for each and every living, breathing, willing, famous woman that had agreed to appear in this video on her Instagram following the weeks up to its release. Trust me when I say we were all waterboarded by Bad Blood content before it actually came out. First of all, I hate the Bad Blood remix. It's not that good. I prefer the regular version. In fact, I prefer the Reputation Tour version, which should have said no attached. Second of all, this video was a waste of time. Taylor's barely in it because she insisted on squeezing so many randos inside of it, except it is kind of good in the last 30 seconds when she puts on a red wig and goes insane and beats the shit out of a simulated Katy Perry played by Selena Gomez. It's actually kind of crazy how we all just okayed this and cheered her on in hindsight. The video is literally about simulating getting into an actual war with Katy Perry and destroying her with arms and weapons at the very end. The cast included Selena Gomez, Gigi Hadid, Lena Dunham, Zendaya, Soraya, Cindy Crawford, Mariska Hargitay, Haley Steinfeld, Kendrick Lamar, Martha Hunt, Cara Delevingne, Hayley Williams, Lily Aldridge, Jessica Alba, and Ellen Pompeo. It goes #1, as I mentioned, by sheer force. I don't think that was an accurate reflection of whether people were listening to the song or not. Although Bad Blood does deserve to be #1. It is kind of just a #1 hit-ish song. Then we have Taylor's first crack in the 1989 armor. This is the 2015 VMAs. Taylor gets into some hot water on Twitter by unrightfully inserting herself into some nonsense with Nicki Minaj. The VMA nominations come out and Nicki Minaj is tweeting up a storm about the different kinds of bodies that get to be nominated for VMAs and don't. And this was good. We ate really good that night. Actually, it was a hellish nightmare at the time, but in hindsight, it was delectable. Taylor really messed with the wrong person here. You know you've got a god or a messiah complex when you think that Nicki Minaj is an equal opponent of yours. And of course, in the skirmishing between Taylor and Nicki Minaj, Katy Perry, of course, as she should, takes her opportunity to throw her 2 cents. Nicki said, "If your video celebrates women with very slim bodies, you will be nominated for Video of the Year." Taylor, out of nowhere, says, "Nicki, I've done nothing but love and support you. It's unlike you to pit women against each other. Maybe one of the men took your spot." Just a completely cunty response out of nowhere. Nicki kindly and generously says, "Huh? You must not be reading my tweets. Didn't say a word about you. I love you just as much, but you should speak on this." At Taylor Swift. Taylor then replies something even more annoying. "If I win, please come up on stage with me. You're invited to any stage I'm ever on," because it's just a given that she's going to win, and she's just that good. I mean, VMAs are kind of bought and sold, so I'm sure she knew she was going to win it at the time. So one way or another, the Nicki and Taylor thing gets resolved, but Katy Perry chimes in and says, "Finding it ironic to parade the pit women against each other argument around as one unmeasurably capitalizes on the takedown of a woman." No lies detected. Something that was also a little bit hypocritical for Taylor to be shouting from the rooftops at this time was about how feminism is about friendship. She's constantly doing Girl Squad PR and talking in interviews about how she's in this group text with all of her female friends, how it's a sisterhood like no other. There's 20 to 25 people who are in it, and she's adamant that there's never any fighting whatsoever that goes on between them. That's just unrealistic. Even in the healthiest friendships, fighting, arguing, sharing your grievances and disagreements is normal and healthy. Here's what she said exactly about the friction between the members of the group. "That doesn't happen. We even have girls in our group who have dated the same people. It's almost like the sisterhood has a higher place on the list of priorities for us. It's so much more important than some guy that it didn't work out with. When you've got this group of girls who need each other as much as we need each other in this climate, when it's so hard for women to be understood and portrayed the right way in the media, now more than ever, we need to be good and kind to each other and not judge each other. And just because you have the same taste in men doesn't mean we need to hold that against each other." Well, it is very ironic, a little bit psychotic to be parading that around while also making the Bad Blood music video. Are we not seeing the complete hypocrisy here? Taylor's sense of righteousness, I think, is part and parcel with her success. When she feels elevated and like she's on top of the world, she also feels kind of emboldened to tell other people how to live their lives. And I think this explains why she gets into such dramatic tensions and feuds. It's never really just like a subtle disagreement. It has to be a total dissociation. This is a quote that she gave to an interview talking about her psychology and her moral code. "I've trusted people before in relationships or friendships and felt betrayed. I judge people based on their moral code. I think someone is nothing without a moral code. I don't care if you're talented or celebrated or successful or rich or popular if you have no moral code. if you will betray your friend, if you will talk badly about them behind their back, if you will try to humiliate them or talk down to them, I have no interest in having you in my life. This section of the article is directly followed by what I believe is a reference to Katy Perry. This is what the writer had to say about that. Late in our lunch, I mentioned something that happened several years ago. By chance, I'd found myself having dinner with a former acquaintance, Katy Perry, of Swift, who offhandedly described her as calculating. This is the only moment during our interview when Swift appears remotely flustered. She really, really hates the word calculating. She despises how it has become tethered to her iconography and believes the person I met has been the singular voice regurgitating this categorization. Am I shooting from the hip? She asks rhetorically. Would any of this have happened if I was? In that sense, I do think about things before they happen. But here was someone taking a positive thing, the fact that I think about things and that I care about my work, and trying to make it into an insinuation about my personal life. Highly offensive. You can be accidentally successful for 3 or 4 years. Accidents happen, but careers take hard work. I think this is part of the reason why Taylor stopped talking to the press, because she was contradicting herself literally every 5 minutes in the span of this feud and could never really keep her story straight exactly about what it was about. And something that I really don't like about Taylor as a public figure from time to time is that she's a bit of a revisionist historian. She tries by literally just saying something different to make you believe that what she had originally said was not what she meant. And I don't like that. Here is a question that she answered about a year later after the original Rolling Stone interview concerning the Katy Perry mess. The interviewer said, "You never say who your songs are about, but you can see that if people believe something, it essentially becomes fact. So by not saying who you're writing about, aren't you allowing a public consciousness to dictate the meaning of your work? If everyone assumes that Bad Blood is about a specific person, aren't you allowing the culture to create a fact about your life?" Taylor responds saying, "You're in a Rolling Stone interview and the writer says, who is that song about? That sounds like a really intense moment from your life. And you sit there and you know you're on good terms with your ex-boyfriend and you don't want him or his family to think you're firing shots at him. So you say that was about losing a friend." And that's basically all you say. That is literally not all that she said. She went on to describe the exact circumstances in which she lost this friend. Who in this world is going to be able to pull dancers out from a global world tour to pull onto another world tour? It really narrows down the list of credible suspects. She continues, "But then people cryptically tweet about what you meant. I never said anything that would point a finger in the specific direction of one specific person, and I can sleep at night knowing that." This is lying. This is crazy. This is literal, not telling the truth. It's insane to me either that she thought that she could pretend that that didn't happen when it was printed in black and white, that talking about someone else's global arena tour didn't really, really, really narrow down the list of suspects. Taylor tries to justify doing this by saying that she really wanted to lead people's attention away from her ex-boyfriend. Why should we protect a man over a woman in this scenario? I don't know. I thought feminism was about friendship. The interviewer goes on to say, "But nobody thinks that song is about a guy." Taylor says, "But they would have. So I don't necessarily care who people think it's about." Okay, I just needed to divert them away from the easiest target. Listen to the song. It doesn't point to any one person or situation. If you listened to my previous albums, you would think this was about a guy that broke my heart, and nothing could be further from the truth. It was important to show that losing friendships can be just as damaging to a person as losing a romantic relationship. You could have said it was about a friend without pointing people in the direction of who it was. If we're playing the blame game, the reporter then kind of gags her in his summation of what she said. Now, there are more than a few molecules of bullshit in this response. When Swift says that's basically all you say, she's neglecting to mention that she also told the reporter that the disharmony stemmed from a business conflict, and the individual in question tried to sabotage an arena tour by hiring away some of her employees. These details dramatically reduce the pool of potential candidates. Yet consider the strategy's larger brilliance. In order to abort the possibility of a rumor she did not want, she propagated the existence of a different rumor that offered the added value of making the song more interesting. So this was all happening around the time when Taylor was really starting to lose the control of her narrative as a public persona. You can't make people believe things are true when they are patently not true, and especially when there's a paper trail. The public is smarter than you think they are, and they generally don't like being lied to or deceived, which is partly why Snakegate came around her like a ton of bricks. Why did the word calculating affect her so much, you wonder? Because maybe there's an element of truth to it. So what's Katy doing in all of this time? By and large, not much. She doesn't really talk about it until she's on her own record cycle in 2017. The only thing she really does is like a few shady tweets here and there. Taylor is the one who is talking and addressing at length on the record this feud, who the song is about, why it happened, etc., etc. Taylor's specific fixation on taking down Katy Perry was also kind of confirmed in a string of angry tweets sent by Calvin Harris in the wake of their breakup. When Taylor revealed that it was her who actually co-wrote the song This Is What You Came For, he incorrectly presumed that she was trying to, diminish his accomplishments, when really she was just taking credibility and ownership of her own work. But he did kind of spill some tea in his replies. He said, "Please focus focus on the positive aspects of your life because you've earned a great one. I figure if you're happy in your new relationship, you should focus on that instead of trying to tear your ex-boyfriend down. I know you're off tour and you need someone new to try and bury like Katy, etc., but I'm not that guy. Sorry, I won't allow it. So fast forward to 2016, 2017, we are in a post-Snakegate world. Naturally, when Taylor is down and out, Katy takes her opportunity, as is totally fair given what she had to endure, to respond. She first posts a video of her lip syncing to Kanye West's song's Famous and tweets that she would definitely collaborate with Taylor Swift if she said sorry. In May, Katy Perry releases Swish Swish Bish. I think this might have been the nail in the coffin of her pop career. It was a highly embarrassing intergalactic flop that featured such lyrical highlights as "You're a joker, I'm a courtside killing queen." She calls Taylor an old coupon expired, and she says that karma's not a liar, she keeps receipts. Truly humiliating. On Jimmy Fallon, Katy describes this as an anthem for people who are being bullied, which I suppose is kind of true. She was being bullied. Then in Carpool Karaoke, James Corden finally asks the million-dollar question and directly addresses Katy Perry and Taylor Swift's feud. Katy says there's a situation that she started and it's time for her to finish it. Katy confirms that the feud started over backup dancers that performed in both Taylor and Katy's tours. So there's 3 backing dancers on tour, she says, and they asked me right before they went on tour if they could go. I said, of course, I'm not on a record cycle right now, but I will be in probably about a year. So put a 30-day contingency in your contract so you can get out if you want to join me when I go back. Katy said that when her dancers did that, they were fired, which is very different from being stolen away. Don't you think? That's a different narrative. I tried to talk to her about it and she wouldn't speak to me. It was a full shutdown. And then she writes a song about me and I'm like, that's how you want to deal with it? Karma. She then goes on to say this about closing the chapter and ending the feud. Right before Witness comes out, Katy again speaks out about Taylor Swift. No one has asked me my side of the story, and there are 3 sides to every story, 1, 2, and the truth. I'm not Buddha. Things irritate me. I wish I could turn the other cheek every single time, but I'm also not a pushover, you know, especially when someone tries to assassinate my character with little girls. That's so messed up. And it's so funny because that's actually exactly what Taylor was trying to do. Assassinate her character with little girls. And literally the night that Witness drops on streaming, Taylor Nation does a Pearl Harbor in a Notes app apology format. In celebration of 1989, selling over 10 million albums worldwide and the RIAA's 100 million song certification announcement, Taylor wants to thank her fans by making her entire back catalog available to all streaming services tonight at midnight. At this point, she'd been withholding her entire musical catalog from Spotify basically since it started, so like 3 years. This was a big deal. And there is just no reason why this had to be released on the same day as Katy Perry's album, other than I hate you, Katy Perry, and I want you to fail. 1989 gets 1.6 million streams, and Katy Perry's brand new album gets 1 million. Then we go on to a stalemate, and the stalemate continues for a few years. Taylor learned some lessons about being the change you wish to see in the world and treating people how you want to be treated, etc., karma, blah, 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 through the Reputation era, and she certainly has tried to revise the narrative of what happened and abdicate a lot of responsibility for, I would say, initiating this argument in public as the aggressor. She has definitely twisted how it went down in hindsight, blamed it largely on the media, and it was really her that brought it up out of the blue unasked in the first place. In 2018, on the opening night of the Reputation tour, I believe, Katy sends Taylor a literal olive branch, and it has a note from Katy that starts with, "Hey old friend, I've been doing some reflecting on past miscommunications and hurt feelings between us." And Taylor posts this saying, "This means so much to me." About a year later, we're going into the Lover era image rehab. Taylor wanted to pivot away from the dark associations of being calculated and vengeful and focused on foes and enemies, and she really needed to reconcile that Katy Perry beef once and for all, put it to bed, close the petty chapter. So what did she do? Invited her to come to the You Need to Calm Down music video set. But before that happened, Katy documented their reconciliation on Instagram by posting a plate of cookies with "Peace at Last" written on them, captioning "Feel so good" while tagging Taylor. A week later, they dressed up as a burger and fries and hugged in one of the worst music videos for one of her worst songs. Amazing. Both of the pop stars went on to talk about their rekindled friendship in separate interviews. Katy went on the Ellen DeGeneres show and she told the audience that it was actually just a really unfortunate misunderstanding and that they made amends, and Katy is all about redemption and forgiveness and setting an example for younger people that it can be cool to ask for forgiveness and confront someone that you may have an issue with or a problem to talk it out. And in the meantime, Taylor spoke to Rolling Stone again on her first cover story in 5 years, briefly alluding to her reconciliation with Katy Perry by bringing up a conversation they had about their zodiac signs. We talked about how we've had miscommunications with people in the past, not even with each other. She said, "I'm a Scorpio. Scorpios strike when they feel threatened." And I said, "I'm an Archer. I stand back, assess the situation, process how I feel, pull a bow, and fire." She said, "Oftentimes I've had this delay in feeling something that has hurt me and then saying that it hurts me. Do you know what I mean? And so I can understand how people in my life would have been like, whoa, I didn't know that was how you felt, because it takes me a second to process." So when I'm trying to connect that to things that she said about Katy in the past, the very first shot that was fired where she talked about how Katy would come up to her at award shows and say really mean stuff to her and then just walk away, I'm wondering if Katy was just kind of like running her mouth and not really intending to be mean, or maybe just being a little cunty in the moment and walking away and forgetting about it, not realizing that this was sowing a seed of genuine hatred and some sort of beef in Taylor Swift's brain, and it took her a couple of years to when she felt that she was powerful enough to take a stand against her and exact her revenge. That's kind of my hypothesis on why exactly this feud took so long to bubble up, but also to die down. So who wins and who loses in this scenario? It's kind of hard to talk about like tangible damage that's been done to either side, but I think the numbers for Witness and 1989 kind of speak for themselves. Katy's loss of relevance is certainly her own fault mostly, and I'll definitely get into that more in my video, How Katy Perry Murdered Her Career, when I do my Witness retrospective. But when the most famous person and most popular liked person in the world with deep connections in all corners of the industry is coming after you 5 minutes and presumably also spreading things about you behind your back in the industry, I can imagine it's not so easy to do well. My reflection on this is that there are only so many women in the world who can relate to this specific level of fame, attention, critique, and pressure, and they are two of them. Naturally, the industry pits artists against each other and the media does overblow feuds, but Taylor really utilized this feud for a specific reason, to neutralize a threat, and it worked. So when everybody comes after me for saying there was a dark side to 1989, I hope that they come and watch this video, because I think that this explains, in a more macro sense, why the Katy Perry feud was not everything that it seemed on its face. Write me a comment down below and let me know how you think Taylor's assault impacted Katy Perry's career, and let me know what you're looking forward to in the upcoming 1989 week. Release week is so soon, and I can't wait to write it out with you. Goodbye, Swifties.